Hi, my name is Jill. You are here at Road Culture Rules, where we're starting the conversation about all things road culture. There's lots of different styles, but today I want to talk about the idea of your road trip, which means the journey of your life. And we're going to just do a brief, on detours, getting lost, rest stops, and just cruising. We'll take a break, deep breath in, hold for 4, exhale, and we'll see you on the other side. So the first thing I wanted to bring up is a detour. And the reason I want to talk about this stuff today is I'm having my own issues with detours, rest stops, and getting lost. And so I wanted to just do a little overview of how life is actually working on your nomadic journey, because it's really not that simple. I think there's an idea that, I'm going to go on a road trip, or I'm going to have an adventure, I'm going to become a nomad, and I'm just going to move forward, and it's all going to work out. And, this is also, as we've talked about, is the internal journey, which to me is always the more important one. But it's this internal journey that we're on. It mirrors the external journey that we're on. And, and I will be honest with you, I have been struggling this last week with, again, what I'm doing here. And so I'm feeling like I'm having some refocusing and I'm ready to get going again. And I thought this would be a good time to talk about that idea. So really, the first idea is the detour. And the detour is, I was headed this direction, and now all of a sudden I find myself going that way. And, we detour for a lot of reasons. We detour because there's a physical barrier. It could be a real road barrier that makes you have to go in a different direction. It could be an illness. It could be a lot of different things that creates a detour. And that can create a lot of anger and resentment and frustration. But sometimes you just have to trust that the detour is really part of the bigger picture. So detours are extremely common, once you sort of commit to having either a physical road trip adventure or an internal one. Rarely does it go in a straight line. The second one is getting lost. And I don't know how you feel, but it's really easy to feel like you're lost in this life. I don't know. Does it feel that way to you? It feels that way to me. But I will also tell you that sometimes getting lost actually creates the best adventures. And so even if you're not on a nomadic journey, it's really easy to feel lost in our life, even when everything around us is familiar. But it's also, again, it's part of the journey. And I think one of the most important things about that moment is to acknowledge that, I am really lost. I'm struggling. I don't know what I'm doing. And taking a minute to refocus. And, I will tell you, in my YouTube journey here, I get lost all the time. And again, if any of you have spent any time here, you will notice that I'm all over the place and I can't seem to stay focused, which is kind of an ongoing issue with me. But one of the reasons I like the journey metaphor is because, there's some physical journey stuff taking place, but also, the internal journey. So I like that as a mirror, as a metaphor, as a way to look at both aspects of your life, is that, getting lost is part of the process, and then pulling back and refocusing. The rabbits, the water bowl tipped over, not that it's not all frozen, so the rabbit's out trying to find its water. It is really cold out this morning, which brings us, getting lost sort of brings us to that third issue, is a road stop. And part of, I think, what happens when you get detoured or you get lost is sometimes we need to just stop and refocus. And, I've been thinking about what this process has been for me, and the first couple years was movement. And it kind of peaked into a really bad place, and I had to rest. And I, have shared that before, where I parked on one person's piece of land for a year. And that was when, I was recovered and able to refocus. And, sorry, there's just so much static electricity. Blah! that refocusing period then allowed me to figure out which direction I wanted to go. But even then, I'm still struggling with exactly what that looks like. It's a constantly evolving process. Not that it doesn't make sense to my little brain, but it looks very confusing on the outside. But it's that rest stop that kind of, for the metaphor, allowed me to pull out a map and figure out, okay, now where do I want to go? Because this isn't working. I feel a little bit recovered. Now how do I keep moving forward? And so I think the rest stops are also part of the journey. And again, so much of what you see is this right now in terms of nomad life or road culture life is constant movement. And like anything, if you're constantly in motion, you're having to always deal with being in motion. Sometimes you need to stop long enough to assess and figure out what's going on. And there's kind of a negative connotation that I see out there with actually plopping down in one place for a while. And, so when I talk about road culture, it's not about being in constant motion, because I think, what happens is the motion creates the change and the crisis and the success. But if we don't stop at a little rest stop once in a while to reassess and figure out and recover and make a new plan, then we're constantly in the crisis, success, goal, move way of being. But I think we lose a lot along the way. So rest stop is not a bad idea. Which brings me to the last thing, which number 4 is cruising. And I think cruising can be as difficult or problematic as getting lost. And, one of the things that happens, I'm going to keep giving the YouTube analogy here because I got to be honest, I've had huge issues again with it this week. So I'll talk about that in just a minute. But cruising is really finding something that works and then just getting in that mode and not having, much thinking, just moving along. And cruising is really helpful part of the time. It's helpful to actually create some movement. Cruising can be as restful as a road stop in terms of not having a lot of struggle with what's going on in your life. Cruising is a job. Your job's going well, your relationship's going well, your health is going well, all the big stuff is going well. Sometimes we have to cruise for a while to recover as much as the kind of withdrawing at a rest stop to recover. So those things both have value. I'm not saying cruising is bad, but what I am saying is that if we can lose decades of our life in cruising mode. And I say that because so much of our growth comes from the challenge and the crisis, which is back to the detour and the getting lost, is that, we need all of these things in order to create a really successful or meaningful life. But it also makes the journey, the physical journey, interesting too, is that if you can recognize, which one you're in, if you're lost, if you're completely detoured and you want to get back on track, which is my huge issue. I have track, and then my little ADHD brain is all over the place, and I have to keep getting detoured. It's constantly having to bring myself back. Sometimes I make it, sometimes I don't. Needing rest stops or just cruising. These are all really important pieces of this overall journey, whether it's a literal journey or an internal journey, is that there's all the different components. And I really wanted to talk about that today because I haven't made a video for a while, and I went to my class, so I'm going to talk about that in the next video. But I've sort of come full circle. Last week I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm getting a lot of negative reinforcement from YouTube right now, and in terms of the numbers, and then I'm losing people again. And so it becomes a question of, do you stay on your path? Do you keep traveling your road when there's a lot of external cueing that's a negative reaction to it? And that's a really important question for yourself. When people are telling you, why are you doing that? When they're questioning your choices, it creates doubt. It's difficult to stay on your correct path. And that's why, all these things, detours, getting lost, having to rest, just cruising, all these things are a part of You know, are you on your path or are you getting off track? And it's not about a straight, pure, consistent line. It's about being aware of what's actually happening. And so, you know, I've spent the last week kind of all over the place. Like, what am I doing? This isn't working. To the point where this morning I was able to come back and say, you know what, that was just a little detour. I've had my little rest stop. I moved out into a different kind of environment, and that gave me a break and come back and kind of think about it. And I feel back on track again. So who knows if I'll stay there, but it's just me being honest with you. But I just wanted to do this little content, this little idea, because that's really part of what this journey is there's lots of stuff that gets in the way, and it's super easy to get lost or off track. And it's our duty, our responsibility, our work to bring ourselves back and make sure we're going the direction we want and not the direction dictated by friends, family, frickin' YouTube, or even you guys, because it's hard to stay on track when you've got a lot of other feedback coming at you. And that's kind of what this last week has been. So that is my little talk for today, and I am so glad that you're here. I appreciate you taking this journey with me. But before we go, I'm going to take one more deep breath for the road, as I hope you will rise with the sun in your eyes, love in your heart, feet firmly on the ground, so even when you do get lost, you're at least grounded, where we take one step at a time on Survival Road. So with that, I hope you will live free and die wild, my friend, and we will see you next time.